To today's video where we're going to be talking about the parts of being your true authentic self that no one is talking about. Because the reality is, right, we are living in a culture right now where everyone everyone's a life coach. Everyone's giving advice on the internet. Everyone's a therapist. Everyone's all of these things. And everyone who even is like selling us stuff nowadays, right? Selling us Pilates, selling us workout things, selling us diets, selling us entertainment, selling us books, selling us clothing, are telling us that the secret to a healthy life and the secret to a life that feels amazing and the thing that's going to change everything about your reality is stepping into your authentic self, right? Being your true self, honoring your true needs, honoring your true wants, finding your real identity and being that, and not letting yourself be, conditioned by society about who you should be and how you should fit in and all of this stuff. And this message of you need to be your authentic self. And when you are your authentic self, you're going to solve all of your problems is one that I think is both very positive and absolutely holds truth. And there is a lot of benefit to learning how to be your authentic self. And at the same time, there are a lot of things that people are not saying about what it really means to be your authentic self and the kind of outcomes that we can experience when we are our authentic selves that need to be talked about. Because a lot of us are doing this work to figure out who we really are and to figure out what's actually true for us and to deconstruct our identities from culture. And then we're running into these roadblocks and we're running into these hardships and we're running into these negative consequences. And we're thinking that something must be going wrong or we must be doing something wrong or that something is happening that shouldn't be happening. And it makes us retreat. And then I also think that there is a lot of misunderstanding about what it really is to figure out your real self, to figure out who you truly are, and the tools that actually help us get there. Because so much, again, of our culture is wrapped up in not being true to ourselves. And so many of the people who are telling us to be authentic have ulterior motives for what we want to come to as the conclusion of who we are authentically, right? That have an agenda for who they want us to assume we are. So when we're doing our deconstruction work and when we're doing our who am I really work, we're not actually being given the right tools to figure that out. We're being told who we should see ourselves as and what we should do and what our identity is. But it's not actually supporting us in figuring out what that is for real. Okay? So those are the things that I want to be talking about. Is how can we navigate the roadblocks and the hard things that are going to come up when we start to embrace our real selves? And how can we start to recognize when someone is saying, I'm going to help you find your authentic self, and they really aren't. And they have an ulterior motive, or they're just also confused and don't really know what's going on. So again, right, like we talk about this a lot in the mystery school. And it's funny because in the mystery school that I have created, and in my coaching work that I do a lot, and in all my free videos and lots of what I share here on Instagram or on YouTube, on Facebook, like all of the free stuff that I give to you, it's all the same stuff. I talk a lot about getting mad at our caregivers and deconstructing the programming that we got. And I talk a lot about unpacking our shame, blame, and guilt stories, where we feel like we are not enough, where we feel like we are not good enough, where we feel like we are bad and wrong and to be blamed, and that we're making bad choices and all of that stuff. Because in my experience, being able to work through the shame, blame, and guilt stories we have about ourselves, being able to get angry at our caregivers for how they conditioned us to believe we were supposed to be, to what they conditioned us to believe we were supposed to be, to believe we were supposed to do, to believe we were supposed to have, to believe we were supposed to accomplish, and all the ways that they didn't support us and didn't support our emotional expression, didn't support our creative expressions, didn't support what we were interested in, didn't support our sexuality, didn't support our expression in general, the ways in which they taught us that we're not allowed to be certain ways, and also the ways in which they taught us that we need to be certain ways, that we have to express in certain ways, that we have to do certain things. That is the foundation for where we go off track in being in our authentic selves. Okay? So culture absolutely has a massive investment in us not knowing ourselves, not being connected to our humanity, not being connected to who we truly are. And that is for many reasons, right? Because when we are not connected to ourselves, we are not able to find true community. We are not able to connect with the people around us and to find, like I say, actual safe, loving, supportive community, because we are so in a state of fear. When we are in that state of self-rejection, when we are in that state of hating ourselves, when we are in that state of feeling like if I am in pain in my life, if I am not experiencing the results that I want to be experiencing, it is because I am not good enough. I am not who I am supposed to be. I am shameful. I am guilty. And I don't know who I am. I don't know what I like. I don't know what I want. I don't know what my values are. That is when we are most vulnerable to the culture that teaches us to be hyper individualistic, to be competitive, to be disconnected from our emotions, from our empathy, from our bodies, in exchange for feeding the system, for being productive, for being consumptive, for doing all the things that society says you should do. Yeah? And that then feeds into this influencer culture and this therapy culture we now have that's all about finding your authentic expression. But the way that that is being taught and the way that we're being taught to do that is like, figure out what you want to do, figure out what you want your career to be, as though that's what your purpose is, and figure out the things that you want to consume and that you want to wear, and that, right, like find your style, find your makeup expression, find your workout that is the kind of workout that you do. And what we are being told an authentic identity is not what an authentic identity is. Okay, so that's like mainstream culture. And then we have alternative culture, which is teaching us to find our identities in our hardships, in our chronic illness, in our trauma, in our past experiences of abuse, and in our ways that we are struggling to adapt to and thrive and survive in our culture. And we're being taught that that's what our identity is. So it's like, are you a Pilates princess, sweet girl, or are you like a chronic illness ADHDer, and that's who you are? You see what I'm saying? And then that all becomes, what do you consume and what do you produce? Who are you based on what you consume and what you produce? That's how our culture is teaching us to identify ourselves right now. Does this make sense? This is why I'm saying that so many of us who are struggling to find our identities are struggling to find them. And even in a culture that's now telling us, embrace your neurodiversity, embrace your sexuality, embrace your quirks and your flaws and all of these things, it's still being done in a context of so that you know how to sell yourself to others as this is the kind of person that I am, right? Like in your Instagram bio, to put your chronic illnesses and your struggles and your job title. Not to say that there's anything wrong with that, okay? But what I don't want to say that identifying with a neurodiversity or with a sexuality or with anything that is true to you is wrong or bad. What I am trying to say is that that is not all of who you are. That is not necessarily how you need to say, like, I identify as this, and now I need to find all the people who are like that, and I can only exist as that, right? Like, that's my identity. That is a part of your identity. That is a part of who you are. It can be a very important part of who you are. You can go through a period of time where you need to like really express that and get that out there and break through the shame, blame, and guilt barriers that have been there around these things, these parts of yourself for a long time. And I think that that's very healthy. And a lot of us, when we first find out that we are neurodiverse or that we have a different sexuality than cis, straight, heteronormative, when we are coming into realizing these things about ourselves, that we need to have some time and some space to express that. But again, to then have that be co-opted, this is what I'm really trying to say, to have that then be co-opted by society and turned into another thing that just puts you into a box and says, these are the people you're allowed to hang out with, these are the people that are going to understand you, and these are the people who aren't going to understand you. These are the things that you need to be and do and express, and these are the these are the careers you can have, and these are the limits you have to put on yourself because of these things. That's the problem. And when identifying with those things becomes another thing that culture then says, okay, good, now I can sell you stuff based on that, right? You identify as this, well, here, now you need this. Now you got to buy this. Now you have to be this kind of person who buys these kinds of things and cuts your hair this kind of way and dresses in this certain way and has this aesthetic. And here's all the ways that we can sell you a million different things based on your identity. That's where we're losing the plot. You see what I'm saying? Identity is being co-opted by a culture that is only concerned with what you produce and what you consume. And so we are being severely limited in figuring out our authentic identity because of that. Your identity is not what you consume and what you produce. Your identity is not what you put in your Instagram bio. That's not what living an authentic life is. Okay? That's finding more boxes to put yourself in so that culture can continue to sell to you more things you don't need, and to put you into more boxes, to feel more separated from the people who are not like you. And it just creates more division, more separation, more of the problems that we're seeing. Okay? So does this make sense so far? Does anybody have any questions? That what we are being taught right now as being what identity is more or less just more things to help you decide what you're going to consume and what you're going to produce. It's not real identity. Okay. So to back up and to really figure this out, we need to understand that for most of human history, for most of our time here on the planet, humans found their identity and their authentic expression within a closed, tight-knit community of people that were working together to survive and thrive. Okay? Like most ideal conditions was we had these groups of people where everyone knew everybody. Everyone was working together to figure out how to survive. And within that, we were able to figure out what each person was naturally kind of drawn towards and good at and could do, that allowed them to kind of express their strengths and grow into more mature, more empathic, more developed versions of themselves within the context of a group where that expression then fed into what you offered to the community. Okay? Now, I'm not saying that that's ideal. I'm not saying that's right or wrong. What I'm saying is that is how, for most of human history, we developed and discovered and expressed identity. It was like, who are you within the context of the tight-knit community that you live in, where you're all living and thriving and surviving together? That was how we found identity. So this whole idea, right, the hero's journey thing that a lot of us gravitate towards when we're thinking about finding our authentic selves. That hero's journey was done within the context of a safe, loving, supportive community that we were a part of. Finding who you were, going out and having your, independent time and figuring all that out, and then coming back to the group and saying, okay, this is who I am, this is what I've discovered. That was the context. Now compare and contrast that with what we're living now, where most of us are so incredibly isolated, it's not even funny. Right? We now grow up in a culture where the nuclear family is prioritized above all things. Yeah? So we're raised in conditions where we don't have that extended family. We don't have that extended group of people who care about us and who we care about. We have these tight little families of mom, dad, brother, sister, if we're lucky, siblings, maybe some grandparents thrown in there, right? But we don't have the extended family, and we don't tend to have other authority figures who aren't our biological family, who care about us and support us and have the time and the energy to nourish us as people, right? Like we're slowly losing like teachers, religious figures, just other members of the community that pay attention to and nourish children and young adults and are just kind of there for you if you don't want to talk to your parents, if you're having a hard time at home. Like, there are so few resources for kids growing up these days in terms of a support, right? And then these kids are being raised in a lot of ways by social media and the media in general. Like, kids are young and they're on their iPads and they're on their phones and they're on social media sites. They're on YouTube. They're on these places where, again, they're being exposed to so much stuff within a context that's not safe because nobody is looking out for their interest. They're not being exposed to things by people who are genuinely connected to them, who know their circumstances, who know their life, and who are sharing information with them in a way that's supportive for their growth as an individual. But rather, they're being exposed to just all of this stuff that is, generally speaking, incredibly stimulating for their nervous systems and way too much information. And again, there's no filter for it. They're just being exposed to influencers and people who are teaching them all sorts of things with that ulterior motive of getting them into this culture of consumption and production. Who are you and what are you going to be interested in based on the things you can consume and the things you can produce? And we're getting hooked on all these like hyper stimulating TV shows. We're getting hooked on like already being exposed to the parasocial relationships that come with social media and feeling like they know these people when really they don't. And then not being able to tell that they're essentially just constantly being advertised to by these social media people and by YouTube, and by, like, their minds are just like completely open because that's where you are as a child. And they're just being indoctrinated 24/7 with things to consume and things to produce. And so on the one hand, they're more educated and more aware than any generation, like any of the generations coming before them. But at the same time, so indoctrinated, right? And then if we think about more like our generation, the Gen Z, millennials, us in the middle, we were somewhere in between these two things. We sort of had people around us. We sort of had social media. We were in that in our growing up years. But the way that culture is set up right now is we don't have supportive, safe communities. Most people have parasocial connection, have strained to shitty relationships with their family, are maybe coupled up or not, right? And we tend to have friendships in our early, like in our college years until we partner up, and then friendships become less and less important. You prioritize your main relationship, you have kids, you get the job, and then, so if you then are a single person in your late 20s, early 30s, and beyond, a lot of the time you're doing life like mostly alone because people have coupled up And if you haven't coupled up, you're pretty isolated, right? You didn't grow up with that extended family. You didn't grow up with even your own family a lot of the time. You didn't grow up with elders and mentors and people in your community that cared about you. You were alone. You were isolated. We are more and more as we go forward. As our world becomes more and more of this global society, the ironic thing is it's making us more and more and more and more isolated. So then trying to find your identity, trying to find who you are within this totally new context that has nothing to do with how our species has ever found identity or self before. You can imagine how this lack of connection is really messing with us. So that's prong one. Prong two is that so much of how we are conditioned to be in our hyper-individualistic, consumeristic culture is to deny and suppress our humanity at every turn. Literally, you can't go anywhere on social media, on Instagram, on Facebook, in culture in general, in my opinion, where there are communities of people that are interested in healthy emotional expression. We have spiritual communities telling us you're not allowed to be angry, you're not allowed to be sad, you have to be high vibes all the time. We have therapy and shadow work and all this stuff that's telling us to identify with our anger and our sadness as though like this is who we are and this is what we're always supposed to be and like this is a part of our identity. We are taught to suppress and deny and ignore our own emotions. We are not taught how to process them, how to understand them. We are not taught how to process or understand or be with anyone else's emotions, right? We will notice that most people are uncomfortable with our emotional expression and that we are uncomfortable with other people's emotional expression, right? Even if we consider ourselves to be empathic, caring, loving human beings, we might find ourselves be in a state where when someone around us is angry or sad or upset in some way, we automatically take on the responsibility of I have to fix that for them, I have to help them, I have to help them process it, I have to help them get rid of it. Or is it about me? Did I do something wrong? Oh no, are they upset with me? Da da da. Right? We don't know how to healthfully support someone through and just validate and see and understand and hold their emotions like a healthy community. We don't know how to have a boundary between our emotions and other people's emotions. We don't know how to own our own emotions, not project them, or how to understand that other people's emotions are their thing and that we can be there for them and validate and all that stuff without having to take responsibility for their emotions. Right? We're all over the place. And we're taught, again, to see each other as competition. We're taught to see each other as an impediment to where we want to go in terms of getting our needs met, success, climbing the ladder, doing all of these things, or as a stepping stone. How can I use you? Are you going to be good for me in terms of getting ahead, in terms of finding a partner, in terms of whatever it is I think I need to do or be to fit into culture? We are trained to see each other as either the reason why we are getting our needs met or the reasons why we aren't. And this is for a very specific reason, right? It's so that we won't look at the system and how it is set up in a way that does not support life. And I've said this a million times and I will say it again. The system we have right now is a total inverse of real reality. In real reality, the systems of consumption and production and the way that we run society. That's what I talk about when I'm saying the system. That's what I mean. How we run society, how we decide what we're going to consume, what we're going to produce, and how we're going to do those things so that everybody's getting their needs met to the best of their abilities. So the social programs we're going to have, how medicine is going to work, how infrastructure is going to work, all of these big things. That's the system. That system should be judged based on how much life it supports. The quality of the system should be judged by how much life the system supports. Human life, animal life, nature life, plant life, life. The thing that has value. You have value. Your neighbors have value. Your pets have value. The plants have value. The earth has value. That is what is valuable. Now, how do our systems support that life expressing, generating, growing, being healthy? That's how things should be judged. A healthy system would be based on that. And then all the time we have left over, where we don't need to be consuming and producing, because we've figured out a way to support our community, we are then spending on self-expression and growth and creativity and connection and time outside and all of these things that actually nurture us as human beings. That's what a healthy system would be. What we have is the exact opposite of that, where life is judged as either valuable or not valuable based on how much it gives to our systems of consumption and production. Right now, our system values excessive consumption and excessive production at the cost of everything else. That the rich keep getting richer. And they will exploit and harm and rob and steal and rig the system in the favor of rich people as much as they need to, so that they will continue to profit and become richer and richer and more powerful. And rather than us seeing that and being like, oh, okay, maybe part of the reason we're all struggling so much, we're all so depressed, we're all so anxious, we're all so overwhelmed, we're all so lacking in feeling connected, we all feel scared and lost and like we don't know what we're doing and like the world is falling apart. Instead of being able to say, well, yeah, it's because the system is totally messed up, we blame ourselves. We say, it's because I suck, because I'm not good enough, I'm not working hard enough, I'm not doing my side hustle enough, I'm too sick, I'm too this, I'm too that. I have shame about everything about myself, right? So all of those things that our caregivers, now you see how this all ties together? All of those things that our caregivers told us were wrong with us and bad about us, and the things that we shouldn't be doing and the things that we should be doing and all that stuff. And the lack of connection and the lack of mentoring and the you need to be buying this and you need to be doing that and this is the kind of career you should have and this is the kind of production you should be doing and this is the kind of consumption you should be doing. All of that then becomes the basis through which we identify, this is why I suck. This is why I feel bad. This is what's wrong with me. And these are all the things I need to consume and all the things I need to produce based on my identity that are going to fix me. You see? You see how this works? We feel like shit because the system is shitty. It's exploiting us and it teaches us to hate ourselves. And then all of that conditioning that we got, that's what we assume is wrong with us. We identify with all that stuff. And then we try to find our identity in healing all that stuff, or fixing it, or consuming or producing in a way that aligns with what culture tells us is wrong with us and what culture tells us is going to fix us. Or we blame each other. We lack empathy. We are trained not to have empathy. We are trained not to have empathy. We are trained to see each other as competition and the reason why we are struggling. Immigrants are the reason why. Your neighbors are the reason why. So that we won't blame the system. And then it teaches you again, identify as conservative, identify as this kind of political party, identify as this, identify as that, so that everyone else is the other, that you will then see as the reason why you're not surviving, the reason why you're not thriving, the reason why your job is insecure, the reason why eggs are so expensive. It's because of these people. Because now you've been trained to identify as not them. You see, culture has taught you. You identify as an American. You identify as this culture, as this sexuality, as this neurodiversity. And so if you're in pain, it's because everyone else in culture isn't like you. And they're the problem. Instead of, the system is the problem. Do you see what I'm saying? Do you see how all of this leads to us thinking we're finding an identity when really we're just being completely indoctrinated? So much of what our culture tells us is finding your identity. It's just more individualism. It's capitalism. It's competition. It's hierarchy. It is not genuinely figuring out who you are. It is not figuring out what you need. It is not connecting to your humanity. Because again, in real reality, your neurodiversities, your struggles, your traumas, the hard things, the illnesses, all that stuff, these are things that play a role in who you are. But more importantly, they are just things that in a healthy society, we would have systems of support around. So we wouldn't have to identify with them so much. Because they wouldn't be oppressed. They wouldn't be a reason why you can't compete in the system. In a healthy society, we look at the strengths and the weaknesses of all the people in the culture, and we allow those who have strengths in this area to make up for the weaknesses of the people in this area, so that we can all thrive together. In a healthy society, in a healthy culture, sexuality is sexuality. If we had a healthy culture, it wouldn't be a discussion in terms of, are we going to accept this or not? It would be, who are you? How do you want to express? Can you do that in a consensual way where everyone's happy about it? Great. Can you express it and celebrate it as part of your, expression here on the planet? Yes. And it would just be safe. In a healthy society, it would be safe to be however you are. Period, end of story. There would be no discussion to have. And then in a healthy culture, our identity, right, is the amalgamation of all of these things. It's our sexuality. It's the things we struggle with. It's the things we're great at. It's the things we're good at. It's the thing that we offer to the culture. All of these things are a part of our identity. And so it's not something we put in an Instagram bio. And then on top of that, finding our true identity requires that we develop our humanity, our empathy for others, our empathy for ourselves, our capacity to have emotional awareness of our own emotions and others' emotions, that we can regulate, that we can validate, that we can be there for our own emotional process and the process of others. Because empathy is a highly evolved trait. We need to recognize this, that as animals in the animal kingdom evolve in their brain structure and their complexity, like going from bugs and lizards and reptiles all the way up to mammals, the more complex a species becomes, generally speaking, the more they start to live in a way where they prioritize community. The less complex a species is, the more they are in competition and individualism. As humanity evolves, we become more community-minded and more empathic, because it is not a weakness to be empathetic and to see others as yourself. That is a huge strength. A culture based on human compassion is that culture that I was talking about. It's not one where we are sacrificing ourselves for each other. It's where we understand that when we work together, your strengths, my weaknesses, my strengths, your weaknesses, what do you offer, what do I offer, who are we, what are our needs, how do they compete, how do they balance? When we live in that way, we create successful communities. We create successful societies. We are able to understand what is valuable and where we should be putting our time. And we are able to see where excessive consumption and excessive production are destroying us, destroying the planet, destroying relationships, destroying authentic connection, destroying authentic expression. And this constant drive to be doing and proving yourself through what you wear and what you have and what you own and what you do and how you identify is killing us. This lack of awareness around what human beings need in order to thrive. Generally speaking, connected, safe community, time in nature and outside, time to not be stimulated, emotional expression. Yes? Basic fundamental needs: clothing, shelter, food, water, safety, and time to explore our creative expressions. When our whole lives are made up of just keeping our heads above water, you can see how we don't thrive. And that's not because you're not regulated enough. It's not because you're not doing enough therapy stuff. It's not because you're not setting enough boundaries. It's because it doesn't matter how you identify. You're not getting your fundamental needs met as a human being. So this is why I say in my courses and in my talks and everything, we need to start with unpacking our conditioning. Who were you trained you're not allowed to be? And who were you trained you had to be? And all of the fears and all of the doubt and the stuff that comes with that. That's step one. Getting angry at your caregivers for how they indoctrinated you and who they taught you to be and what they taught you to be. That's critical work. Learning to connect back with your emotions, with your body, with your humanity. This is how we start to find our identity. It's not about your job or what you wear or what you put in your Instagram bio. That's not how you find your authentic self. You have to start with the where did I get programmed and conditioned out of my humanity? And where did I get programmed and conditioned that what I consume and what I produce is who I am? Where did I get conditioned that the reason why I don't have the love and the support and the care that I want is because I suck and I'm failing, versus is because we have a culture that is set up that way? That's how we return to the source of this energy, is we learn to love ourselves. Because again, in our culture, we are at once navel gazing, the most self-obsessed, navel gazing people who know nothing about our true selves. Right? We're obsessively wondering what other people think about us, what other people are perceiving of us. Am I doing it right? Should I be feeling this? What is wrong with me? What category do I fit into? Da 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 da. Obsessive navel gazing with no awareness of who we really are. What are you actually feeling? What are you afraid of? Where did you get rejected? And how did you then turn that into rejecting yourself? And then how are you trying to fix that with what you consume and produce? That's where we start. That's why this work isn't about identifying so much with neurodiversity or with any of these other things. Because, again, it's not to say that those things aren't important. It's not to say that those things aren't a part of your identity. But it is to say that that's not how you find who you are. Okay? So before I wrap up, are there any questions? Understanding that, yes, when we do this work, it's going to be hard. There are going to be days and times where it's very painful and it's very confusing. And learning to be with our emotions and learning to be with our bodies and learning to process the things that we've been through, to question our stories, our shame, blame, and guilt stories, is hard. Right? That's why I keep making these videos. That's why I have the mystery school. That's why I do one-on-one coaching. That's why there are so many other good therapists out there and people who can help you validate and work through your emotions, somatic practitioners. There are lots of good people out there who are not trying to do magic, who are not trying to sell you on $4 billion courses and shit like that are just genuinely there to help you reconnect with yourself. And then from there, you start to connect to how you fit into an empathetic, caring, supportive, loving community. That's why I say this self-love path, when we do it correctly, it's not going to make you selfish. It's going to make you self-aware enough to know what you have to offer to the community. It's going to make you emotionally regulated enough that you can be responsible for your own emotions, and then you can start to be the kind of person who can be there for your friends and your family's emotions, where you are going to understand what you have to give to the culture in terms of actual expression and not just feeding more consumption and production. And more than that, you're going to start to see where you don't need to be buying stuff, where you don't need to be producing, where you don't need to be taking more for yourself, where you don't need to be competing for more, and how you can pull back from the system. Because what you offer and what you don't participate in are equally important. You are going to start to find your value system. And that value system is going to be based on what supports the most amount of life. And then that's when you're going to realize, yeah, wow, I don't need this month's latest trend. I don't need to be accepted in this way. I don't need to be participating in this in order to be safe and good and loved. Because that's not who I am. That's not my identity. That's not reality. That's the system. This is what it's really like to find your identity. Connecting with your humanity, connecting with your emotions, connecting with your body, realizing where you don't need to be participating in the system, pulling out, doing less, consuming less, changing the way you consume, changing the way you produce, changing the way you interact with the people around you, and having more empathy. That's what it's actually going to look like. And that's why a lot of people just completely miss it. Because we think it's, am I a Pilates girl or am I a runner? That's not your identity. That's not who you are. That's a phase of your life. It's these bigger things that connect you to humanity, to your humanity and the greater humanity that are your actual identity. Okay? Does this make sense? That's why we do this work. That's why we do this emotional work. That's why we do this parent deconstructing stuff. That's why. Because it leads into seeing all these bigger things. So you can find your real true self within this capitalist nightmare. And you can pull out of it. Okay? All right. So unless there are any questions, I'll leave a second for that. I think that's it for today. This is the part of finding your identity no one's talking about. Right? It's not about the clothes you wear. It's not about what you put in your Instagram update. It's so much deeper than that. Connecting to your emotions, processing your childhood, figuring out where you were indoctrinated, finding your true value system in your humanity. That is your identity. Okay? Okay. All right, so thank you for being here. Thank you for being you. I hope this was helpful. I hope you find some resources around here that are helpful. And until I see you again, have a beautiful, wonderful day, week, month, night. I'll see you later.